Before we start the presentation, I would like to go through some housekeeping rules. Please disable your camera and microphone during this session. This presentation is being recorded and will be available at the following page. We will also be sending a follow-up email. We will include the link and that email. During the session, the live transcription feature is enabled. Please note that the translation might not be correct. The chat feature would be disabled during the presentation. We would enable it once we start the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Thank you. Next page, my link. So my name is Jitendra, and I'm International Student Advisor Immigration Specialist at SFU. I will be your presenter today, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Mei-Ling Gao, who is moderator for today's session. She's also the Manager of Immigration Services. Again, she would be moderating the Q&A session that we would be doing at the end of this session. Thank you. So as we are recording this session, we would turn off the camera during the presentation to save the bandwidth. We will turn on the camera again once we start the Q&A session. So before moving to the agenda, I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that SFU is located on the unceded Coast Salish territory, the traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Kardsi Nation. As a brief background, a territorial or land acknowledgement is an act of reconciliation that involves recognizing the traditional territory of indigenous people who called it home before settlers arrived and still do in most of the cases. Thank you. During today's session, we will discuss the various updates introduced by IRCC in the last few months, as well as the consideration on the study permit application. Following the update, we will answer frequently asked questions that you submitted during the registration. And at the end of the session, we will have a live Q&A session. Next slide, please. So as International Service for Student, or ISS, we offer a range of services to help support your transition to SFU as an international student. You can see the list of services on this slide that we offer to SFU students when they start their program at SFU. Next slide, please. So as International Student Advisor, we provide non-academic advising and information about your temporary immigration status in Canada. That includes your study permit, work eligibility, post-graduation work permit, etc. In addition, our team is also able to offer advice on medical insurance and navigating the Canadian healthcare system. We also have various self-guided resources that are available on our webpage, which is an excellent resource on how to apply for immigration documents. We always recommend these self-guided resources as a first step to answering your question. In addition, our FAQ page features answer to the commonly asked question that students have. Next slide, please. So before we dive into the updates, I would like to draw your attention to the bottom part of each slide. Particularly, immigration policies can change rapidly and without notice. Therefore, the information that we present today is current as of today, which is February 16, 2024. We also understand that you might have many questions as we have a lot of new announcements for IRCC in the past few months. While we would try to answer most of the questions, please do note that we might not have answered to all of them as we continue to seek clarification from IRCC on certain topics. SFU will continue to communicate with you as information becomes available. So with that, we can start with the first update, letter of acceptance verification process. So in the announcement that was made on October 27, 2024, IRCC announced that for every study permit application submitted from outside of Canada, post-secondary institutes such as SFU will be required to verify the authenticity of the offer letter. Now, why the step was taken? So this step was taken to protect the interest of international students and preserve the integrity of international education system in Canada. When you submit your study permit application, please make sure to include your SFU ID, which starts with 30, and DLI number, which is mentioned on this slide on the application form. So the application form could be IMM 1294 or 5709, depending upon whether you're applying from outside or inside of Canada. So the next update, we would like to talk about the updated financial requirement for the study permit application. Starting January 1st, 2024, a single new study permit applicant is required to show proof of funds of 20,635 Canadian dollars in liquid funds to study in Canada. If your family member would be accompanying you, the amount would vary depending upon the size of the family. So for example, if you and your spouse would be traveling to Canada together, you would be required to show $25,690 in liquid asset. Now, what do you mean by liquid funds? Liquid funds are something that is easily available at any point of time. So for example, let's say if I have $50,000 in my bank account, I'm able to withdraw at any point of time. So these are considered liquid funds. But for example, let's say that if you have immovable properties like house, they are not considered liquid as you would need to sell them, and the valuation of house will vary depending from time to time. So with your study permit application, you are required to show liquid fund for 1 year of tuition fee plus 1 year of living expenses. In addition, you should also be able to show the travel costs for your travel to Canada. Can we go back, please? Okay. So on this page, the latest update is about the attestation letter. So on January 22 this year, the Government of Canada announced an intake cap on international study permit application for 2 years. So for 2024, IRCC is expected to approve approximately 360,000 study permit. To meet the cap, IRCC will allocate a portion of cap to each province and territory, who will then distribute the allocation among the designated learning institute. As per the various sources, the province of British Columbia have received approximately 83,000 study permit application. However, we are yet to find the number that will be assigned to each post-secondary institute in British Columbia. The table in this slide explain now because to meet the cap that was introduced by the IRCC on January 22nd, 2024, the new process was introduced. So if you undergrad student or you would be required to include an attestation letter along with your application. So this slide explains who need attestation letter with their study permit application and who are exempted from the requirement of provincial attestation letter. So for example, students applying for colleges or undergrad program that is bachelor degree at SFU would be required to include attestation letter with their application, whereas students applying for master or doctorate degree will be exempted from the requirement of attestation letter. In addition, family members of study permit or work permit holders who are in Canada will also be exempted from the requirement of provincial attestation letter. So again, if you have any question, if you're not clear about whether or not you are required to include attestation letter with the application, please connect with us individually and we would be happy to help you understand the requirement of the attestation letter. And can we go back to the screen? Okay, so these were the updates that were introduced sometime in October, December, and January last year that we just discussed. Apart from that, on January 22nd, 2024, the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship announced a few other important updates. We'll only discuss updates relevant to students starting their program in summer or fall this year. Since we have already discussed the attestation letter, let's move on to the post-graduation work permit. So as per the new announcement, master's student would be eligible for 3 years of post-graduation work permit, even if the length of the program is less than 2 years and who meet the other PGWP eligibility criteria. Now let's discuss what are the other PGWP eligibility criteria. So the other PGWP criteria are your program should be at least 8 months in length. You should have completed a program from designated learning institutes such as SFU. You must have maintained full-time status during every academic term, with the exception of final term or an authorized break from your program. For SFU undergrad and other short-term graduate level program, that is graduate certificate, diploma, there are no changes to the eligibility criteria for post-graduation work permit. Okay, so the next update is about the spousal open work permit. So in the coming weeks, an open work permit will only be available to spouses and common law partner of students in graduate degree program, that is master's or doctoral degree program. At this point of time, we don't know when the implementation date, what is the implementation date. We are still waiting for information from IRCC about the implementation date. For spouses and common law partner of current international students seeking to extend their existing work permit will continue to remain eligible under this scheme. So in a short, the students who are already in Canada, the spouses of undergrad students who are in Canada, already studying in Canada, will not be impacted by this announcement. So I understand that this is a lot of information in terms of updates, and we also understand that some of the information is not completely available. Many of you have already submitted your question during the registration process. So let us start by answering those questions now. Okay. So that's one of the most commonly asked question during the registration process was, I have received my offer letter from SFU. Can I submit my study permit application at this point of time? Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. So it depends. You can application only if you are exempt from the requirement of provincial attestation letter. So if you remember on the earlier slide, master's and doctorate students are exempt from the requirement of attestation letter. So if you have been accepted into master's or doctorate program, you are able to submit your study permit application. And if you are not exempted from the requirement of attestation letter, you must wait until you have the provincial attestation letter. So for example, if you have been accepted into undergrad program at SFU, you should wait until the attestation letter is available. But in the meantime, you can still work on your application, collect all the other documents, write your study plan, and basically keep your application ready until the attestation letter becomes available. Next slide, please. Other question that a lot of students asked during registration was, I'm required to include the provincial attestation letter along with my study permit application. When can I expect to receive the letter. Next slide, please. So each province and territory in Canada has been given until the end of March to establish the attestation letter process. The letters are not available yet, but the SFU is in close contact with the government of British Columbia and is expected that the process will be available in the coming weeks. We will keep you updated once the process has been established to issue the attestation letter. Next slide, please. Another question that we received was, I am an undergrad student and my study permit is already approved. Will I be impacted by the new announcement? Next slide, please. So, international student whose application was received before 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on January 22nd, 2024, as well as whose study permit has already been approved, are not impacted. They are not required to take any action, and they would be able to start their program as scheduled in summer or fall, depending upon your intake. So in a short, yeah, if you meet any of those two conditions, you don't have to worry about the requirement of the attestation letter. Next slide, please. Now, when you apply to SFU, sometime you might be required to complete a requirement, and as such, you might be provided with the conditional offer letter. So can I apply for a study permit with a conditional offer letter? Next slide, please. So whether or not conditional offer letter is required for your study permit depends on your country of nationality. So as per our experience, most countries do not require conditional offer letter. Only certain countries have the requirement that you should only be submitting your application with unconditional offer letter. So it is important for you to check that if the country specific instruction for your country has the requirement of conditional offer letter or not. But again, if you are an undergrad level student, there's also an additional requirement of attestation letter at this point of time. Next slide, please. So study plan or letter of intent is not listed in my online application. Should I still include it? Would the study plan strengthen my study permit application? Next slide, please. So when applying for Canadian study permit, students are strongly encouraged to include a study plan so the immigration officer is satisfied that your primary purpose to enter Canada is to study, and then you will be leaving Canada at the end of your authorized stay. So study plan will give them the information which will help them to inform a decision whether you are a genuine student or not. So it is highly recommended that you include the study plan, even if it is not reflecting in your checklist. So while writing your study permit, you might want to explain why you would like to study in Canada to your program for which you have been accepted. You may include things such as quality of life in Canada, the high standard of education system, the benefits of being immersed in multicultural society. What is your overall education goal? Why are you pursuing your education in Canada versus a similar system in your country, which may be more reasonable, right? So you may want to explain how studying at SFU can help you academically, how it can build your career and grow as a person. A solid comparison between Canada and your home country will strengthen your application as well. You may also state the advantage of obtaining a degree in Canada and how that can open more opportunities in your home country. So as a study permit application is a temporary resident application, you are expected to demonstrate your ties to your home country and that you have good reason to return to your home country after completion of your program. You may talk about your family, assets, properties, or job offer upon return to your home country. Now, some international students may be considering working or immigrating to Canada upon completing of your program. While dual intent is perfectly legitimate, it is not advisable to discuss in your study permit, as your main objective is to study in Canada and achieve your educational goal. It is also important to note that immigration officers handle hundreds of applications and will only have few minutes to read your study plan and determine your eligibility for this study permit. Therefore, we recommend that to keep it concise and summarize it to 1 page if possible and 2 pages if needed. Next slide, please. So as you know, there are two different ways to apply for study permit as a regular application and also under student direct stream. Can I apply for a study permit under the SDS stream and what are the requirements? Next slide, please. To be able to apply under the student direct stream, you must be a legal resident in one of the 14 countries listed on this slide. You must also meet the other requirement listed on the right-hand side of the slide. For example, you must pay upfront tuition for 1 year. You must open a GIC for 1 year of living expenses, which is $20,635 for 1 year. Upfront medical examination if needed, police certificate if needed, attestation letter if needed, language test, and there could be additional requirement as per country specific visa requirements. Next slide, please. Now, one of the requirements for student direct stream is that you should be paying your tuition fee for 1 year upfront. For more information on how to pay upfront tuition fee, please refer to this slide. For a graduate student, for example, the 1 year fee would be reflected on your offer letter. For undergrad student, in the offer of admission package, the 4th page will contain information about the estimated tuition fee for first year at SFU. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. One of the most important consideration between choosing SDS, a regular application, is the processing time. So if you would be submitting your application as a regular application, the current processing time is 10 weeks. Whereas if you submit your application under SDS, the processing time is 20 calendar days. Please note that the processing time only counts when your application is complete. So for example, if you need to provide biometrics, the time to complete biometrics will not be counted towards the processing time. Once you have completed the biometrics, once the application is complete, only then the processing time will start. Next slide, please. I would like to pursue co-op with my program. How can I apply for co-op work permit along with my study permit? Next slide, please. So we have divided the answer for undergrad and graduate student. So for example, for a graduate student, if your program has a mandatory internship, practicum, or co-op, your offer letter will accept it and you will reflect it, and you would be able to apply for your study permit and work permit at the same time. For undergrad student, most of the undergrad program at SFU do not have a mandatory internship or co-op. So therefore, you will not be able to apply for your co-op when applying for your study permit. In order to apply for your co-op, you must be admitted into the co-op program first. Once you have been accepted, you would be able to apply for co-op from inside Canada. Next slide, please. I think one of the last questions that we received was about post-graduation work permit. So for example, I would be starting a bachelor degree at SFU. Will I qualify for the post-graduation work permit upon completion of my program as per the January 22nd announcement? So as per the new updates, only new student who would be enrolling into public-private partnership college program will not be eligible for the post-graduation work permit. So as a public university, SFU does not participate into public-private partnership. Therefore, the current student and incoming undergrad student SFU will continue to remain eligible for the post-graduation work permit. Please do note that you will need to meet the eligibility criteria as we discussed before. Just to reiterate, the eligibility criteria are that your program should be at least 8 months in length. It should be completed from a designated learning institute such as SFU. You should be full-time in every academic term, with the exception of final or authorized break. Next slide, please. So before we end this part of the presentation, we would like to provide some tips and reminder, which we hope that would be helpful when you submit your application. So if you are not exempt from the requirement of a provincial attestation letter, and if you've not submitted your application, you must wait until the attestation letter is available. As mentioned before, you can still work on the other documents of your application. Please do refer to news and updates section for more information. We will continue to update our website once the process is established to provide the attestation letter. Remember to include your SFU ID and DLI in this study permit application form. Refer to the country-specific requirement for additional documents for your study permit application. Remember to include a study plan with your study permit application, even if it is not required. You can check the IRCC processing time on this link. Your immigration document will not be issued beyond the validity of your passport. So if your passport expiring in the next 1 year, then your study permit will be valid only until the expiry of your passport, and you may need to extend your study permit from inside Canada. Complete upfront medical exam if applicable, and submit your biometrics as soon as possible. Review the study permit and immigration documents tips on this page. So we will provide a link in the follow-up email that we will send it next week. Next slide, please. Again, if you have any question about any of the content that we discussed during the presentation, or if you have any question about the study permit application, please contact us through different ways. So you can contact us through email, you can book an appointment with us, or you can join virtual drop-in advising if you are outside of Canada. So for your benefit, I have listed the 2 upcoming drop-in advising on February 2nd and February 29th from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. PST. If those time doesn't work out for you, please do email us and we would be happy to help you with your questions and inquiries. So thank you so much for staying with us during this part of the presentation. Next slide, please.